Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is part 2 of the Self-Improvement General series, and I'm going to be talking about mental health. And when I say mental health, this time around, I'm not talking about intellectual health. Those two totally different episodes. So, what do I mean by mental health? I mean the fuel that you need to have a perspective geared towards success. And the reason I mention that I realize now that normalizing mental health and this fixation on how a person feels and their mental well-being has been pushed really hard. And it's not inherently bad. I've seen a lot of people act like that's a bad thing. I do think that this whole normalize anxiety attitude is not good because you're not looking at it as an obstacle or as something that needs to be overcome or dealt with. It's just the new normal. You're supposed to be heaving and sobbing in the break room at work every day. That's normal. And people should respect that. No, that's not the case. But there are things that you can do to fortify yourself against what is a very anxious world. We are bombarded by sensory information that nobody else in history has had to deal with. And it is one of the reasons why people are a lot more anxious or depressed. It is environmental. It is also chemical, but not neurochemical in the genetic sense for most people. And as such, that explains it. It's not that people are. I don't know if you guys heard that, but there was like really like loud sirens all of a sudden. That was the reason for my sudden shocked expression. But yeah, it's not that people are inherently getting weaker. It's more so that we are bombarded by things that people should not have to deal with. And in order to understand that better, let's look at how anxiety works to help people, like why it's there to begin with. Let's imagine for a minute that you're a Neanderthal or a Cro-Magnon or an early Homo sapien, and you're walking around through the woods. Something lunges out at you. Now, before you even totally picked up on that, your amygdala, which is often called the watchman, noticed things. Changes in the way the light danced off the leaves, shifts in color, sounds, subconscious sounds. And it prepared you for that instant. And the moment it lunges out, you feel alarm, you feel terror, your body floods with adrenaline, and you bolt fast as you can go. You run, you don't look behind you. You run until you can't run much more. And then you're safe, or you feel safe. You look around and you got away. And then you continue on your day, and you're a little wore out from that adrenaline rush, but other than that, you're fine, and it's kept you alive. Now fast forward to the 21st century. Now we have people who are beset by those same dangers, but they're abstract. It's the email they were supposed to send that morning. It's the, every time they turn on the news, some sort of crisis that's probably or possibly, more accurately, going to affect them. It's this desire to keep up with their neighbors' things because they want to, attract a mate. And wait, I said that sounded really cringy, but they want to do all the things that people in the past did, but they did in much simpler ways because you didn't need, a pool to keep up with your neighbors back then. You just needed to have a pulse. Well, all these things make people anxious. So how do we deal with it? Well, there's a few things that I highly encourage people to do, and one is to read books on having a mindset that is geared towards success and self-improvement. And I'm not going to list any of those because I list them pretty regularly in the Mental Diets episodes, and it would be just sort of redundant. Not to mention it would take longer. But, immerse yourself in both spiritual and philosophical treatises that make you strive to be better instead of fixate on what's negative. And conversely, just like with physical diets in terms of mental diets, also abstain from too much negative stuff. I have had to do that a lot lately myself. The news bombards us with things that for the most part aren't going to affect us but make us concerned. And that's an issue. Abstaining from negative content is just as important as absorbing or consuming positive content. And the biggest thing that I argue for people's mental health, well, it's two things really. One, try and look at things objectively. Try and pull yourself out of yourself. Stoicism pushes that a lot. Because for the most part, everyone you meet is fixated on something and anxious about something, and it's probably something that you would find very trivial and be alarmed that they're concerned about it. This happens a lot when you know somebody who does something that's self-harming, and then you find out why, and you're like, wait, that's what's bothering you? That's nothing. Well, there's a good chance a lot of your concerns are also less important in the grand scheme of both your life and everything in general than you think. So that's one thing, is pull yourself out of whatever perspective you've got, if that perspective is causing you any kind of suffering. And the second thing I would encourage you to do is to meditate. Meditation is really the biggest thing I would encourage everyone to do for their own well-being. And like with exercise, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode. If not, I'll reiterate it now. If you're going to do exercise, find a routine that is common or popular, that works, and stick with it for months. For months. Okay? If you want to do a bro split, do a bro split. That's fine. But do it for several months, half a year at least. Half a year at least. If you want to try something else, push, pull, whatever, I don't care. Full body, I don't care. That's not the point. Stick with it. Because I see that a lot. People end up doing more harm than good by bouncing around between things. And I see something similar with people will read these self-help books or whatever, and they'll do that instead of apply them. So what happens is when they're having a bad day, they use that as a band-aid for the things that are keeping them from having good days. So don't do that. Well, likewise with meditation. I've very rarely seen this, but I have seen it, and that's why I bring it up. There's mantra meditation, there's mindfulness meditation, there's watching the breath, which, by the way, is the one I would most encourage for people who are just starting. There's all sorts of ways that a person can meditate. There's all sorts. But don't bounce around, especially if you're just now putting your toe in that pool. Stick with one. Stick with one I would actually take it even further. Unless it's causing problems, stick with it for a year. Stick with one kind for a year. And if you want to branch out, then if you're curious, or one of them, like I said, I knew somebody, for example, who was getting migraines from watching their breath. Really surprised me. They benefited from another form of meditation, and that was a good decision on that part. But the bottom line is, stick with it. That's the best thing you can do, though, in my opinion. That and walks, which I guess I should reiterate every episode, because it's good, again, for your psychological well-being, your mental well-being, intellectual, and your physical well-being. Walks are flipping great. Take walks, if you can, wherever you are, preferably close to nature. But yeah, that covers most of the intellectual, or not intellectual, man, I'm mixing them up because they're so similar. The mental well-being. Oh, one other one. I'm glad I just remembered this. If you are suffering from serious panic attacks, I am not qualified to talk too much about this, but I would encourage you to listen to people who are, and that is flooding. Flooding is a terrific way. It's very counterintuitive. It goes against every instinct you have. In fact, it's the equivalent of sitting down when that saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the bushes. But what you're doing by flooding is you're actually training your amygdala that these abstract saber-toothed tigers are not a real threat. And 99% of the time, that is the case. Most abstract things that you think are going to be really bad for you in the long run, because by virtue of being abstract, they're not. So I highly encourage you, if you're really beset by anxiety, to look into flooding. There's lots of wonderful videos on the matter. Just Google, I guess, flooding anxiety, flooding panic attacks, something like that. Anyway, that covers it. Thing to take home: meditation. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.